There have been many calls from American lawmakers on Capitol Hill that the United States is not doing enough to support its veterans as a new wave of troops return home from war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Many are dealing with serious wounds, as well as with complex and difficult problems, both seen and unseen. They fought, and many have died to protect this country, and we need to fight to protect them. We owe it to those returning service members and to the veterans to provide them with a seamless support system so that they can put their lives back together, so that they can pursue their goals, so that they can not only go back to their communities, but be able to give back to their communities and to help strengthen our nation.
But a Pew Research Center poll shows that 70% of veterans who left the service before the September 11th terrorist attacks rate their military benefits as positive, compared to only 55% of post-9/11 veterans. So should the federal government be doing more to provide for American veterans? And if the government can't afford to do more, then what options are left for filling the void? Joining me now to offer their takes on these issues, Jessica Venegas. She's Director of Strategic Partnerships at Community Solutions. That's a grassroots organization working to eradicate homelessness in the United States. And Brandon Friedman is a U.S. Army veteran of the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan and author of The War I Always Wanted, The Illusion of Glory and the Reality of War. Jessica and Brandon, welcome to the show. Why don't I start there? Christina Kaufman wrote this piece in the Washington Post, and she's the wife of a battalion commander, and she said, "I know many of us feel embittered, powerless, disconnected from the Army in which our husbands serve." And she goes on to talk about the wives and how they feel like the Army's basically turned their back on them, and really kind of these issues that are really kind of gnawing not just at the vets but their families as well. And let me start with you. It seems like this is a story that's going completely undetected by much of America.
Well, I think anytime you have after a decade of war, you're always going to have issues with returning troops. The Department of Veterans Affairs is actually still paying out benefits to several children of Civil War veterans. So when you have a war that goes on this long, taxpayers are going to be paying for it for years, and you're going to have issues for decades. Some of the issues we see now with troops coming home are the employment rate, disability claims, education. And these are all things that we have to get a handle on, and these are things that these families, as they return, are dealing with.
Jessica, let me kind of piggyback off that. Aaron Glantz, who was our guest earlier before the break, said that the Vietnam vets came back from the war, and some of them were spat on. These vets are coming back, and what people are doing is they're fixated on their new phones, their iPhones, or they're watching Britney Spears. One was an insult, the other is indifference. Frame that for me, and what are the residual effects of that?
Well, the returning community just is coming back really to a vacant landscape of opportunity. I mean, we're struggling already as a country, and so poverty is such a large issue for us as it is, and now returning veterans or returning servicemen and women are coming back generally with some form of disability and really a loss of their job, which was the military, and now not being able to reintegrate into society and have a social support system that can support them back into the system of their community. And so with half of the population coming back to rural communities where the systems are not in place there as well, it's really challenging for these veterans to find a way to re-navigate themselves back into work, back into a volunteer community, and back into a social setting that benefits them and their family.
Well, can the government be doing more? Brandon, why don't I turn to you? I know you were there in the trenches. Can they be doing more? Should they be doing more?
Yeah, I mean, you can always do more. I mean, with the suicide rate, employment, because there are always veterans that don't have jobs. There are always veterans that feel disconnected from the society that they left and that they've now come back to. And we have to get those veterans back into class, into school, get them an education, and get them back into the workforce. Because what we saw after World War II, when the GI Bill first came out, was that was a huge investment in our society, because we put these thousands of veterans came home, we put them back to school, and then once they finished school, they were able to take those experiences and really give back to their society. And it was one of the greatest investments we've made. And what we have to do is emulate that in every facet of Veterans Affairs, from homelessness to mental health to access to to healthcare, education, all that stuff. And I think the government's making progress, but certainly there is more to do.
He's talking about homelessness. This is something that you know about firsthand, so describe what it's like out there.
Yeah, we have roughly 70,000 homeless veterans on the street, and there have been incredible improvements. The federal government, VA is a healthcare system really, and the Veterans Administration focuses on making sure that medical needs are met. And so homelessness for them is a condition around extreme needs. And it's been recent that they've really focused on how housing plays a role in that, in helping support somebody be healthy. And there have been some amazing programs and a lot of headway in making sure that the homeless veterans get access to resources for rental support, for mental health care. The real gap that we're seeing is that homelessness is a condition that comes over time, and so these returning vets now that are coming home with disabilities, there's not really a system in place to help support them. And so there are really fantastic programs. In fact, we're working with VA on a number of them that really are targeting chronic homeless veterans, and there has been a lot of moving the needle in the right direction where that's concerned. But there's a big gap in VA services and programs where there's home ownership and there's homelessness, but the gap in between for affordable housing to stabilize a family is missing.
There's Tom Henning, who runs the Honor for All group. He's a Vietnam vet, and he feels like PTSD is still stigmatized. It's still an issue, and that looms large over a lot of these issues: the depression, the suicides. He feels strongly that it's a wound, just like any other wound, but it's an invisible wound. And he feels strongly that if the military were to honor these people with Purple Hearts, maybe that might reduce the stigma. Do you think that's an answer? And I know you served in the military. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if awarding a Purple Heart for something like that is appropriate, but I do agree with him that you would never say someone has missing arm syndrome or missing leg syndrome. It's a battle injury, and that's what happens with PTSD. Post-traumatic stress, it's insidious. It's one of these things that often has a delayed onset for people, and that's why not only educating veterans as they get out about it is important, but also educating society so that people know that not only this is something veterans experience, but it's something that is highly treatable, and it's something that is manageable and that you live with, and that you can be a very productive member of society. I agree that there is a stigma associated with it, and I think that's unfortunate. One of the things that the Department of Veterans Affairs has done recently, they've done a number of outreach efforts, one called About Face, one called Make the Connection, and then a recent one that has really been well done called Strong at the Broken Places, which takes this idea, it's from a Hemingway quote, that you sustain these injuries, but as you heal and as you get over it, it makes you stronger, and it makes you a better person for having grown through this experience. And I think if we can get people in the public to understand this process, I think veterans will be better off. And I think veterans hopefully can become comfortable talking about it and not ashamed of this injury they've sustained.
And Jessica, I'm going to give you the final word on this. What do you think about that concept?
I absolutely agree with Brandon. So we work on the 100,000 Homes campaign, and through that campaign we're working with communities, over 170 now, to help support their efforts to find and house their most chronic homeless, vulnerable homeless, and a large population of those are veterans. And what we've seen with communities is that when they go out and really know them by name, know them by ailment essentially and vulnerability, they can help better support them. And so it's programs like that one at the VA, but I think really just the community effort around getting to know who their veterans are and welcoming them back into their community. We partner with Got Your Six, and they're also really making a public relations campaign around making sure that people are welcomed home. This is the effort that needs to happen from the community level to make sure that we integrate our veterans into our community.
Not just one day a year, but all year long.
Exactly.
Right? All right. Thank you both for coming in. It's a very important subject matter, and we thank you for your comments and thoughts.